listening to Parashas Nasso. The title for the class, for all things equal, aside from the article name, Gerim Ger. Loosely, or whatever, translated as stealing from the ger. It's not exactly a literal translation. The context of Gerim Ger, stealing from the ger, is much more vast and diverse, intricate, than simply stealing from the ger, aside from the fact that stealing from the ger sounds absolutely bloody horrible. It sounds not only like instead of a prohibition, it sounds like something that you should do. Stealing from the ger. That's not what stealing from the ger is. With that said, welcome to Parashas Nasso, and for lack of whatever, this is about stealing from the ger, Gerim Ger. Off the bat, let's clarify matters. What does Gerim Ger mean? When somebody commits a crime of treachery against God, they have stolen, for context purposes, from your fellow Jew. And the Jew has denied it, and God takes it personally under the circumstances of the theft. Restitution must happen once it's resolved, and corrections must be brought out. Okay? Now, what happens when we steal from a ger? The Torah does not use the word ger. That's why this is not a simple matter. The Torah says, what happens when you steal from a person and that person has no kin? Or I think the exact language, if I'm not mistaken, he has no redeemer. What do you do with this guy? Who is this guy? Why is there somebody that has no redeemer, no kin, and we make a whole point to talk about him? The commentators, we'll start with Rashi, says this is a ger. Who do you know that has no kin, no relatives, no redeemer? Rashi will tell you it's a ger. And I don't know if it's a convert ger, non-Jewish ger. I don't know anything about anything. All I know is Rashi says, I don't even know if he says literally ger, but it's called Gerim Ger. Stealing from the ger. This comes in, by the way, chapter 5, verse 6 in Parashas Nasso. So there's something now, I've read Rashi, it's called Gerim Ger. That's already way complicated, and if this were a technical class, I would be lost and asleep by now. Right? This is one of those Talmudic classes where you hear a term like Gerim Ger, especially in yeshiva that doesn't deal with Gerim per se. You're going to say, I don't get it. What is Gerim Ger? So that is, thank God, is not our intention of getting into the matters deeply here. But should someone steal from any type of ger for lack of context, okay? You're busted, you make restitution, you correct it, the ger dies before the restitution is made. You give the goods that you owe the ger, and again, I don't know which ger here, it doesn't matter. We're not getting into which ger. I do know the answer, but it's not relevant. And you give the goods to the Kohen, the priest of the temple, and you just made peace in the world. Welcome to Gerim Ger. Now again, the Torah itself here does not mention the term ger or Gerim Ger. Gerim Ger literally means stealing from the ger. But from this unique concept, what are we going to talk about in our class, in our world, in our dimension where Gerim are literally the function? What matters are in the Parsha, related and not related to the ger? How do we learn from this Gerim Ger the impurity of saras? How does that come in to this category or this discussion? And the birth pangs of the Messiah, why does that weigh in here as well? So again, we have Gerim Ger, and I don't even know if that exists when I read the Parsha. So I go through Nasso, and we're going to look for Gerim, just like in every Parsha, right? There's a whatever reason why one would look for Gerim. I do it for many reasons. You out there have maybe a different reason. But you'll go through the Parsha, and it's a bit upsetting. on a personal level, I go through Nasso and I don't really see anything about Gerim. And there's a lot of very interesting things in the Parsha itself. The Nazarite, the waters of the Sota. That along with the Gezel Ger matter. I mean, this whole stealing thing, if I don't know it's a Ger, it's interesting. No Ger. Now, I guess I kind of cheated a little bit, because I know for a fact, famously, that this is the Gezel Ger matter of the Torah. So, with background knowledge, you know to look for it in Rashi. Let's suppose you don't know that, and you find Rashi, you're going along in your learning through the Parsha, you find Rashi, and you find Gezel Ger. In your English, at home, you follow along, and you realize it'll probably be translated, I assume, as something along the lines of stealing from I wish it would say stealing from a ger, but it probably doesn't. It probably says stealing from a convert. I'm sorry about that. I'll apologize for those that have translated that way. Maybe a proselyte, but probably a convert. Only we know that it is not only a convert, it is the larger ger world for those that fall under the distinction of Gezel Ger. Basically, once you're a Torah observant ger, you're relevant to this law. Which was obviously, by that definition, beyond the scope of just convert. Okay, now, Rashi will say Gezel Ger. That's where Gezel Ger stops. Have a nice day. Thank you for coming to this week's class. But the avid student will research matters deeply and say, hey, Rabbi, I want to know more about this Gezel Ger. I've never heard of it. Are we saying we steal from Gerim? We don't steal from Gerim? It's halfway interesting. You know, it's provocative. What is Gezel Ger? And you'll get the answer. You know, again, when you steal from a ger, he dies, no kin, you return the restitution to the jurisdiction of the temple and the priest working there. Now again, we're going to make another radical lateral move here. Right? This is not a logical move to make, but it's the right move. When you research Gezel Ger and you stay away from the Talmudic law-based analysis, which is really a deep law matter. It's interesting when you get into the law, but is it going to sell tickets to Disneyland? Not really. And here, this is why we're making a lateral move. When you look in the Midrash Rabbah is the collection of Midrash on the Parsha. Again, why do I go there? Because we do. Who's we? Anybody interested in learning about the Parsha. It's not a necessary move. But the Midrash Rabbah is the classic book of Midrash, and it does give very great insight into every Parsha. Sometimes you score big, sometimes you don't score at all. When you go to the Midrash every week, you might not know, you probably won't know what you're in for. Some weeks are better than others. When you go in, based on where you're holding, what your interests are, what your knowledge level is, what you hope to get out of it. For that sake, I'm saying, Midrash Rabbah, hear me on this. If you heard anything I ever taught about Gerim, now's the time to listen. The Ger, Midrash Rabbah, Parashas Nasso, is the absolute gold mine of all Gerim in the world. Right? I think we had, Jason, how many pages we have on this? Like 100? Right? But whatever it is, Parashas Nasso is huge in the Midrash by number, how many pages, and the Ger references, whether this is an exaggeration, it was something about 100 numbers, whether the whole thing, but it is a wealth of near seemingly endless Ger references. So much that you cannot contain it in one cognitive stance. It is that overwhelming. In a very good way. Now, with that said, why does the Ger wealth come from Nasso? The simple answer, and it is simple, Gezel Ger in its moral aspect, aside from technical Talmudic, moral aspect, 46 times in the Torah, God warns in some way, shape, or form, do not taunt, harass, hate, ignore, bother, or ruin or upset the Ger. I.e., God loves Gerim, you too should love the Ger. In a nutshell. You have stolen from the Ger, Gezel Ger. You have stolen from him. And so now you're giving restitution. You're making up for his, breaching his dignity. Again, he has no redeemer, no kin, no one in the world to receive his justice. So it goes to the temple, the priest. For whatever reason, the authors of Parashas Nasso and the Midrash, I can't speak for them, but they have chosen, whether by tradition or whatever inspiration, that the most essential Ger Torah comes from Gezel Ger. And it's obvious. Under these terms, it should be very obvious to you, right? We do not forsake the Ger. Thus, in the place where we embellish in the greatness of the Ger, the Parsha really lets it loose. That's the gist of why the Midrash is so great, why the Ger is loaded there, and why we find it nowhere in our Parsha, but like under a rock called Gezel Ger, we flip that rock, open up a Rashi, find a random Talmudic idiom at best, and we see the word Ger, and when you really get into what it is on a intellectual level, the Midrash, for me personally, I as I said, I know what Gezel Ger is. Now, when I saw the Rashi, we're here, oh yeah, Parashas Nasso, and we're at Gezel Ger, and you see the whole Parsha, and there's no Ger, you say, did the rabbis take this seriously? It's like it's like an honest question. Not from actually asking, but your curiosity says, I know Gezel Ger is hidden here. Does anybody else care? That's how I felt myself Friday night learning the Parsha. I'm saying to myself, did anybody else care about this? And you open up the Midrash Rabbah, and you see, wait a minute, they're going into Gezel Ger. Of all that, there's the Nazarite, there's the Sota, and all the other, and the Gershonites, and the Levites, and all these things in the Parsha. And you see, once we start going in the overdrive of the Ger, it doesn't stop. Over and over and over, and you're saying, yeah, bravo! Bravo! The Ger wins here. Somebody cared about the Ger. Now, I've seen enough references of Gerim that it's a rhetorical question. We know the rabbis cared about the Ger. We know there's precedent of Ger. But when you see an obvious overload to the tune of 100 pages of Ger, in the place where you say in the depths of your heart, God, please let this be the place, because it's just fitting this should be here. And it was, and it is. And it was literally almost even not a pleasure to read. It was so overwhelming. You want to take it all in. You're saying what's like the Ger lottery. How do you take all that new Torah in? How do you teach it over? So this article, this class, is not going to be a commentary on the 100 pages of Ger Torah. From this point on, I think I've introduced the topic well. We know what Gezel Ger isn't. We know what Gezel Ger is. We know what the Parsha is seemingly dealing with. Let's now give the gems that come out of it. A lot of Gerim / Noahide want to know, can I wear a talit? Can I learn Torah? Very common questions. Gerim simply want to pray, and they want to pray authentically. They want to pray with the talit. And for Ashkenazi twang, the talus. Pardon me, but for me it's a talus. They want Torah, they want talus, they want prayer. The Midrash states very clearly that holiness comes into the life of the ger by definition of what a ger is. And he is dignified with his increase of holiness through talit and the study of Torah. That's it. That each one's a dead issue. It's not like there's like a wow, that's why the secrets of the world are, that's not this. It just gives you tidbits that are monumental, and then it goes on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one. So I just wanted to squeeze in the Talit Torah win. For anybody following along, yes, there is precedent for the Talit and Torah. That's number one. Don't forget that. Number two, the theme of the Midrash, obviously, is not only Gezel Ger, right? Because of Gezel Ger, we now have a ger formula, but this doesn't need to be said, this is obvious. The undertone of the Midrash now is Ohev es ger, love the ger. So the flavor of the Gerim here, it is overflowing Torah of loving the ger. It's interestingly ironic that I didn't read. I don't know if I did the Midrash Rabbah in Devarim. I think it's Parashas Ekev, if I'm not mistaken, where the love the ger mitzvah is. When we get there, we'll see the Midrash to see what they do. But that would be obvious. It's always a bit cute when the lack of the not so obvious Gezel Ger, random, opaque, Talmudic, halachic yields the most obvious answer possible. Don't steal from ger because you are to love the ger. And that is the underlying theme of the Midrash. I know I've said that a million times today, but it's a very beautiful thing to see. It's like poetry in motion. Next topic. One of the themes is in the Midrash, based on the parsha itself. It talks about saras, right? The skin disorder. How do you call it? Disease, disorder, impediment, sickness. How do you call that? How would you call that? Sickness, impediment.
Saras.
I know saras, but what? How would you? What would you, it's not a sickness. It's a condition. It's a skin condition that goes white and is based on impurity, tumah. The parsha hints at it. It gets into matters a little bit. And we say there are 11 ways to contract saras in the Midrash. And when you look at the 11 ways, some of them are very similar. You can consolidate some of these 11. That it's a bit of making the bullseye and drawing the target around the bullseye, but you can say there are 7. There are definitely 7 distinct categories. The Lashon Hara can be qualified in a couple different ways. Of the 11, coming down to 7. Thus, when you accept upon yourself the 11, you are able to contract saras. If we say that really there are 7 main categories, are themes to become inflicted with saras. Loosely translated and poorly translated as leprosy, you can say it comes down to 7. And the proof the Midrash brings, that it makes a very easy dot system to connect. Naaman. We all know our good friend Naaman. He who contracted saras, chapter 5 of Kings 2. Naaman, the non-convert, Dafka. Absolutely, he is the Ger Toshav, quintessential Ger Toshav. In normative terms, he is your classic Ger. Forget, Toshav, and just call it what it is. Naaman is your Ger. He has Saras. He meets up with Elisha. He goes into the Jordan River, dunks 7 times, and he's miraculously healed of his Saras. Now, we know that Naaman is not Jewish. Now, connect the dots. It's very simple to understand what's going on. Now, on a lateral note, the Zohar asks the very question, what in fact are the 7 laws of Noah? On a philosophical level, why do they exist? Where do they come from? What do they do? Who invented them? Were they around? When did they officially become finalized, set in stone? Again, on another lateral move, the Talmud Sanhedrin challenges the very notion of Noahidism. Were there 7 like this? Were the 7s another system completely? What were they based on? There's a lot of question that one can only assume that there really is no 7 laws of Noah, Noahide, in a simple, traditional fashion. Yet we know the concept exists. There is a concept, but what is it? Where is it? How was it? What is the real thing? Now, to provide context, circumcision, we do not learn it from Abraham. This is another one of those things that's not what I was told. Right? Abraham wasn't the first Jew. Abraham was the first Ger. By definition of the term Ger. We learn circumcision as a mitzvah to the Jewish people in the Torah later on, but not from Abraham. The 7 laws of Noah, in the context of the Midrash, appears to be the same thing. And it follows suit with Gezel Ger. A lot of times we have a philosophical matter, or a warm, fuzzy matter, when in truth, it's a technical thing. The Ger is no different. Right? They're in the Talmudic realm, there's really no such thing as a Ger. Right? There's no, I'm a Ger. In the Talmudic world, I am a Ger Toshav. I have rights in the land, right? It's very, very mechanical and not a fuzzy feeling. Now, the Torah speaks a bit differently, the written Torah, and it uses the word Ger, and we like that feel. But Talmudically, there's no Ger. Are you a Ger Toshav? Are you a Ger Tzedek? Are you a Ger, which type are you? Conversely, there's no such thing as Noahidism in the Torah openly, in the written Torah. Right? We don't find, and God taught Noah the 7 laws, and the non-Jews of the world are to keep the 7 laws, and they are as such. We're told circumcision, outright. We're told tzitzis, outright. We are told Shema, outright. There is no open passage of the 7 laws of Noah, which, again, it presses the matter. What are they? Where do they come from? The Midrash seems to be implying that it is a technical thing. And here's how it works. I like to use this analogy when talking about ritual impurity. Let's say there is a scale of -10 through +10 on the ritual impurity chain. Moses is +10. He is so holy, he doesn't become impure. This is a fictitious diagram. The Pope is your antithesis of Moses. He does not become impure either. He is so impure, he does not even register on the realm of impurity. Right? Let's say there are 2 types of impurity, intrinsically and ritually. He is not going into the temple. Therefore, we don't register on a Torah impure level. Let's call this character the idolater. The idolater is removed from church 1 degree. He is a -9 on the impure scale. He is not Jewish. He is not a ger. He is still considered an idolater. In his heart, he has rejected a certain form of idolatry. By definition, he is susceptible to ritual impurity. He still has a level of impurity in him, right? He's not refined. He has not come to Torah. He is not holy per se as an outward expression. He is not in touch with his soul. He has not realized who he is. But he is susceptible to impurity. Now, he is working on himself. He's repenting. He's becoming a ger toshav, a ger tzedek, whatever, the whole gauntlet. And as the Parsha says, that the proximity of Gezel Ger in the Talit is about becoming holy. And that's what the ger is about. He's becoming holy. The holier he gets, the more impure he gets. And that's not a bad thing, right? Holiness attracts and it makes possible impurity, which is why we have the red heifer, which is why you have to undergo the red heifer before the temple and all these matters. Excuse me. Again, the more refinement one undergoes, the ratios change, right? If I am now a certain level of refinement, I'm at a -5 impurity, -2, 0, to the point where you are really governed by the Torah. The natural state of impurity is gone, right? You are 100%, whether ger or Jew, bound by Israel. Now you're plus. Okay, that should be clear. Taking on the 7 laws of Noah is the Talmudic distinction of being able and becoming susceptible to become impure through saras. Again, it's a bit Talmudic and technical. I'm aware of that. The point would be that through accepting the 7 laws of Noah, you are becoming impure in a state of impossibility of impurity. Thus, the Torah relates the 7 laws as the technical path to becoming a ger. It's one of those instances where you say it's not very romantic becoming a ger. So the 7 laws, Noahidism, became a romantic story, right? You know, I was interested in God and I repented. I found the 7 laws. But unfortunately, a lot of people get stuck in the 7 laws. You know, do your 7, go to heaven. And by definition, the reason why impurity is related to the ger and not the Noahide is, and this is why the Noahide laws are capital. You are obligated to die, the whole capital punishment, because a Noahide, by definition, is really still chewing on the Noahide laws. He has not fully accepted them. That's why the penalty is harsh. When one has accepted the 7 laws, he is fluent in the ins and outs. Tractate of Avodah Zarah 64b. Who is a ger toshav? He who keeps the 7 laws of Noah. And that is the halacha. By that right, the ger is susceptible to impurity. The ger is keeping the 7 laws. the Ger has made himself open to impurity. The laws of the red heifer, interestingly enough, include the Ger. Coming into the temple, the Ger can go. Okay. Thus, you have Naaman as your proof. Naaman the Ger, he receives saras. Right? It is very much related to this whole Gezel Ger. It's a technical matter. It becomes a beautiful matter, but yet it still remains a technical matter. Right? Becoming a son-in-law of Noah Ger is technical, but yet it does have its agaditic, its poetic side as well. Right? I wanted to convey that part because a lot of people don't understand the Noahide Ger connection with impurity, the paraduma, the red heifer, where it all comes from. So just understand, becoming a Ger is allowing oneself to become susceptible to impurity. And that is by definition an entrance into the nation of Israel, as ironic as that sounds. The next matter, that's another, these are all really technical matters. The Talmud on these matters are very, very, very ultra technical. The waters of the Sota. One of those things, who learns that in common perception? Right? A woman is accused of cheating on her husband, and he brings her to the temple and says, I accuse her of cheating. She undergoes the waters of Sota. She drinks, and if she's found guilty by the hands of heaven, she dies. There's more to it than that, but that's the basic story. If she is innocent, her soul is repaired, the guilt goes away, and she has a blessing to be fruitful and multiply. This topic, this goes out to Gerim ben Tishbi, is probably the most profound Ger literature on the planet Earth. The Midrash talks about the waters of the Sota. Does it apply? And is it applicable to the Ger? The masters of Talmud and the Midrash discuss this. They want to learn, it says, Bnei Yisrael, Jews, and not Gerim. Or it'll say, the men of Israel, and not the men of Gerim. And they do this tango. Is it Ger friendly or not? And they battle and they discuss. The end result is, it is Ger friendly. In the simplest sense, you'll say, a Ger man and a Ger woman. He accuses her. She drinks the waters of Sota. Now, when you get into the ins and outs of this discussion, your eyes should literally bulge from your head and possibly explode when you understand the ramifications of this discussion. It actually will say, by Torah definition, it can be a Ger man and a Jewish woman, a Jewish man, Ger woman, a convert woman. It uses the word Gieris. And there are many definitions of the word Gieris. Following along at home, you'll say Gieris is a female convert. And you're right, it is. It's also a female Ger. And lo and behold, a Jewess married to a Ger male, she is called a Geris also, as she is the S of the Ger. She is the female companion of the Ger. Geris. It's a usage that we're not feeling comfortable or familiar with, and let's use that word comfortable. Very, very uncomfortable to teach this, or to learn it, to hear it, to receive it, to find it. So much that the opposing view against Shemaiah and Avtalion, who themselves were Gerim, and they pushed the law through of the Sota, and they sought to bring rights to the Ger Tzedek woman, non-Jew, in all matters of Israel, and you say, Why? Why? Can you think of a greater Holocaust than intermarriage? There's nothing worse in Jewish history, Jewish current era than intermarriage. And this is why the rabbis sought to remove it from Torah. The commentaries explain the opposing view, who sought to remove the ger from sota, the illicit waters, said this is not done. Intermarriage is not good. There's no precedent. So let's teach there is no ger for sota. The rabbi said, nay, nay. You are removing a Torah law. The Torah demands this law is here. You are ruining the honor of Shemaiah and of Tolian. You are disgracing a ger. You are not loving the ger. My friend, you have just done in a what's the word? Not the literal, in a metaphorical sense, stolen from the ger. And for that reason, the final answer is yes, the Gerim and the Geris are applicable to the sota. By that right, what was the rationale of the opposing view? The opposing view is, in today's Judaism, with absolute 100%, this will not happen. Ger, Jew are not married. The convert marries into Israel. In semi-modern history, let's call it the Talmudic era, intermarriage in Palmadisa, in Massa Mexia, the place where the Babylonian Talmud was redacted, intermarriage was rampant between Gerim and Jews. It nearly killed, if not both people, the whole world. It's a relationship that is allowed in Torah. Very certain circumstances. Very certain circumstances. And it happened in the times of the Torah itself, when Pinchas was present with the captive woman, Yafet Toar. The Midianite captives of war. It's a law that exists in a very specific framework. The tribe of Judah did it in certain instances. It's like, it's what do you call polygamy? Many wives. It was never the thing to do, right? The Torah says I can have 10 wives. I want 10 wives. Just because it allows it doesn't mean everybody went out and said, hey, I'm taking my 10 wives. It was allowed, it was done, but it was never the thing. Ger Jew was never ever the thing. Certain circumstances it was done. And if you get it wrong, the chemistry by a smidgen, the Midrash says, the Talmud says, you bring a wayward son into the world. Soreh Amorah, you stoned him. So if you're lusting for this relationship on any level, wayward son comes in the world. There's a lot of relationships in the Torah like this. In the Noahide laws, there are certain relationships that are allowed, but no one's doing it. In fact, the people took it upon themselves to outlaw such relationships. For example, the father-daughter relationship. The people forbade it. The Jewish people have forbidden this relationship. But to say that it's not Torah, that's already a disgrace. To say we don't do it, we don't allow it, just like polygamy has been outlawed for 1,000 years. The rabbis have the right to instruct the people not to do these things. It's been proven in Jewish history that destruction comes from this. Why God allows it, why we're allowed to not do it, why we are really going against a lot of things by doing it. This is what is called a big offense for the Torah. There are a lot of things we can do that we do not do. But where I'm coming from on this is the secrets of the Sota. The most random part of our Torah. Nobody walks in the street of Israel and says, hey, I'm known. Did you hear about the Sota? I had an amazing revelation of Sota. No one does that. Nobody does that. So in the Gerim, Ger, Parashas Nasso, all of a sudden, the essence of the Gerim, being a part of Israel at the most sublime Torah level, the Sota, Gerim, Ger, Parashas Nasso. Absolutely fantastic. Meaning, we can not push the Ger agenda in a lot of places. But in the Gerim, Ger of Nasso, I'm sorry, says the Midrash, I confess at this time, yes, the Gerim are related to Sota. And the alternative was, if you're against it, you're placed in ban at the time that was written. I personally find that extremely interesting. Mainly because of the apropos nature. Right? The one, again, it's like that curiosity. The one place that we're saying, okay, look, I know we have our ways and we do what we do, but in the one place where we vindicate the Ger, can we vindicate the Ger? And the Torah says, yes, we do. And to me, that is a great, great Kiddush Hashem. Now, also in the Parsha, this is just a quirky little matter. It discusses the Nazarite. Now, this is something that's my own shtick. We have a lot of Gerim coming back to Torah today. And everyone says, why do you push the Ger? Why do you use Ger? Call him a Noahide. A Ger is a convert. How do you know Ger Torah? Is there Ger Torah? And the answer is in these random tractates of Talmud. And I always give the example. If there was a guy, a real quiet, synagogue learning Jew, and his hobby and passion is to learn Nazir, the Talmudic tractate Nazir, which by the way is a beautiful tractate, one of the best, but no one learns it. It's not the regimen in most yeshivas, but this guy Moshe learns it. He knows it inside and out. Go ask Moshe, he'll tell you all about Nazir. We haven't seen a Nazir in 2,000 years. And we're not going to see him until the temple comes. That's one of the main things. Most people do not become Nazirites because it requires you to keep it until the temple comes. But Moshe likes it lishma. He learns it for the sake of itself. And then one day, the Gentile nations woke up. Right, this is a fictitious statement, but for context. 1 billion non-Jews, out of nowhere, declare to themselves, we are Nazirites. Moshe says, that's awesome! I know Nazirite Torah. Now, let's say 1 billion women become insincere wives. And they say, we on our own volition have admitted our insincerity. We want to know about the Sota waters. Anybody master Sota out there? Lo and behold, in 2014, we are witnessing Gerim coming back of creation. All of a sudden, these people have been gone for the Jews weren't in the land of Israel until 1948. And by that 1948, you had a hangover of shtetl mentality. And here we are, they're coming back saying, we are Ger. We now have a great mitzvah and opportunity and schus, merit, to give back the Torah of the Ger. It's a fantastic concept. And that's part of what the Gezel Ger is about in the Parsha. It doesn't exist, it's not there, but when we find it, it's there in all of its glory, amidst the likes of the Sota and the Nazir and the Gershonites and the Levites of the Parsha. Should we have a Levite resurrection? The temple comes, everyone say, hey, I'm a master of the book of Menachos. I can tell you how to bring the offerings to the temple. For whatever it's worth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it. The Gerim would be the ancient sect of Talmudic literature to come back and receive a tradition that has been dormant for thousands of years. That is the charm of our Parsha in the Gezel Ger. Now, if you listen to this class, you probably felt very uncomfortable. Talking about the Sota this way, talking about the Talus in this way. If you're Jewish, you probably have no more hair left on your head. You probably pulled it all out by now. It is very uncomfortable, based on history and everything, to speak of the Ger this way. Intermarriage in the tribe of Judah, you don't get more threatening than that. Only this was protocol and precedent many eons ago. And as we're saying, the Gerim are coming back today, and they want to restore a lot of their ways. Even though, let's say, the relationships are not the same, a lot of the things are not the same, but they want their ways. All right, Mr. Convert, you actually should hunker down and start being a Jew. We know you're a Jew, we respect you as a Jew, but why do you cling to the word convert or Ger? You're a Jew in every way. The Gerim are saying we want to be called Ger as well. Because A, it's the truth, we merit it, we're here, every precedent is there to facilitate such a matter. We are told in the end of days there will be Gog v'Magog, the great war, and the birth pangs of the Messiah. And people are in delusion, in denial, saying, well, we think we're close to Mashiach, but birth pangs don't really exist. If we get bombs from Hezbollah, okay, that exists, but other than that, life is great. I love being a Yid in 2014. But Boker Tov. You thought the birth pangs wouldn't come? We are accepting as a people the onslaught of, theoretically, 7 billion Gerim becoming Gerim. And all of that confusion and uncomfortable feelings, bad intentions mixed with good intentions, checking out the Jews, bringing the impurity in the camp, right, by definition of taking on the 7 laws. That is part of Gezel Ger. It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. It's confusing in the Ger Toshav, the Ger Tzedek. Why should we do it? Can't we just say converts are Ger and these guys are Noahides and that's it? Make it easy for me. Nope. It must get resolved. There will be a Chevlei Mashiach. There will be a time of discomfort. And God makes it very clear. And the Midrash backs it up. Gezel Hager. Do not rob the Ger. Do not taunt the Ger. Do not mock the Ger. Don't trample the Ger. You are to love the Ger. You are to help him and give him charity in garment, in wisdom, in bread. Accept him. The Ger is part of the 4th house of Israel. The lesson in our Parsha is very simple and straightforward. The Chiddush, the novelty, is what comes with it. Right? Oh, I can love the Ger. No problem, Rabbi. I love Gerim. Even the Goyish wins. No problem. Okay. And I don't steal from him. I don't believe in taking from the non-Jew. Okay, great. How do you feel davening next to him when you're shul on Friday night? Wait, what? Yeah, he wants to come over for Kiddush. Gezel Ger / love the Ger. Why would we do it? Why would we steal from the Ger? Why would I want to disgrace him? Why would I taunt him? Why does God make such a big deal? Because it's very uncomfortable. When they're calling themselves Ger, the convert calls himself Ger. He tells you something about Gerim in the Torah, you say Narishkeit. No, those were Jews. The Ger brings back a perspective that we're just not used to. We may never ever have been used to it, never will get used to it. In wrestling, they say the secret of wrestling, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. The Ger is very uncomfortable. But when you get into it, there's no greater in embracing the uncomfort that comes with it, the turmoil of great cognitive dissonance. The Ger says, but look at that. You say, I thought that was always Jewish. No, it was a Ger. You begin to embrace those moments. It's not a contradiction. Just like the waters of the Sota. Right? Today we do what we do, then we do what we did, and the Torah is just great. Point being, lesson learned, do not steal from the Ger. That is the definition of discomfort when you get into the ins and outs of that law. The bottom line, just like I am Hashem your God, you shall have no other gods. Don't steal from the Ger. It's uncomfortable. Why? One simple thing that all the commentators say is synonymous with love your neighbor as yourself. The whole Torah on one foot, simply put, is love the Ger. That's it for this week. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.